Mr. Gary Griffith. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Good morning.
Mr. Griffith, of course, you yourself, you were the last Commissioner of Police, substantive Commissioner of Police before the current Commissioner. Right now, the police service, I guess you could say, you know, some people might say it's fair or not fair, but the public is looking to the police and the murder rates and the level of violence, which I think is something that is, I don't know if it's shocking to people or if we've grown accustomed to it. And one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you to come on today is because I have noticed something that I can't say it is so for sure, but there are reasons why I have concerns that the police service may not be as independent, may not necessarily have the proper leadership that it did in the past, or even with Acting Commissioner Jacob, I would argue. There seems to be a tonal shift in how policing is done. It's subtle, but it's there. And one of the examples is potentially the fact that when you were Commissioner, sir, when the government had its public health regulations and they wanted police to go into private homes and break up private parties, there were questions on the legal basis of that. And you actually did not debate that issue or try to go against the Prime Minister, but you seemingly wanted to focus on the areas where, well, you knew for sure we could try and deal with the situation legally. We have a state of emergency for this public health crisis. We will limit the movement of people, thereby limiting their interactions. You showed that, look, I am not necessarily going to just do what the politicians tell me to do. Meanwhile, one of our citizens, by the definition within English law, was kidnapped from Barbados by members of our own police service, whose legal authority to do so we're not even entirely sure under what basis. And the person who I believe was in charge of that operation was then thus promoted to Deputy Commissioner of Police. And it begs the question, do we have enough independence to be confident that when police investigate politicians like a THA secretary, there's no political interference? Mr. Griffith.
Yeah, sure. Good morning again. And you're correct. It reminds me of during the same COVID period, there were 23 odd, I think, police chiefs around the United States that attacked and criticized the most powerful man on the planet. That was Donald Trump at the time, because he was saying things that would have been causing a degree of friction. It is only when you come to Trinidad and Tobago, there's this perception that every single comment made and a directive made by the politician, that those in charge of law enforcement must immediately adhere to it. That is wrong. In my 17 years of military training, I was taught about something that is known as an illegal command. So as much as you believe that that person is a prime minister or president or even a general, if it is the person is given an illegal command based on your training and qualification and understanding law enforcement leadership, you are supposed to adhere to only legal commands. So yes, I would always listen to every single thing that the Prime Minister will tell me from the Minister of National Security. But if it is that it's going along the line for me to see that somebody in charge of UDCOT or HGC is giving a gang leader contracts to build a police station, I will stand firm and tell her this is wrong. It is the same manner going back to the COVID situation. What happened is, unfortunately, at the time, the present Prime Minister of this country he was ignorant of the law. And it happens. But he believed that as he was the Prime Minister, what he says goes. And I stood up to protect the fundamental rights of citizens of this country, and people criticized me for it. But had I not done that, there would have been a repeat of 2011, where we had the same situation where politicians would have put pressure on Stephen Williams, and 500 persons were arrested illegally, unlawfully, unethically, and the taxpayers have to pay tens upon tens of millions of dollars for that. So what happened during the COVID situation is that the Prime Minister was misinformed, and he had so many attorneys around him. He had Faris Alwari, he had Stuart Young, he had Fitzgerald Hines, Keith Scotland, and none of them briefed him to say Prime Minister Gary is correct. The public health regulations meant that you could only arrest persons in a public place. So when you listen to the foolish comments by Philip Alexander and even Kamal Prasad recently on a platform where they said that there was a two-tiered approach. It wasn't. It is because the ignorance of politicians not understanding the law. And Kamala Prasad-Biswas is a senior counsel. Public health regulations only gave the police authority to apprehend and arrest persons if they breach the public health regulations. But what Keith Rowley wanted me to do, what Philip Alexander will talk his nonsense about, and Kamala Prasad-Biswas, as foolish as the law was, we had to adhere to the law. It meant that if you decided to invite 100 persons in your family to a Father's Day brunch, and they were turned up by your home separate occasions, there's nothing we could have done. But if 5 of them left your home to go to the beach, we could have arrested them. So as foolish as the law was, we are not here to look at the ignorance of the law. Our job was to look at the interpretation of the law. So we did the right thing. So when Keith Rowley stated, Gary Griffith didn't arrest these people by the pool, Keith Rowley, you were not educated enough to understand the police had no authority to go in people's private property to arrest them in their private home. Same thing with Kamala Prasad-Biswas when she speaks about a two-tiered approach. That is a disrespect to the police officers. 31 of them lost their lives. Not one of them went absent. Not one of them abused their authority, in contrast to what we have seen all over the world. So you are correct. You need leadership of persons in authority to stand firm and tell the politicians, no, you are wrong. You cannot direct me in law enforcement to do the wrong thing. And it's the same thing that happened with the Barbados situation. We continue to blast the police for what they did, but no police officer could leave the territorial waters of Trinidad and Tobago without the authorization of the Minister of National Security. Why can I say that? Is I was the Minister of National Security and I was the Commissioner of Police. So I know the laws that I have and I know the laws that I did not have. I'm taking a line from a previous president. So the only way we could have left our territorial waters was with the authorization of the Minister of National Security. If I had to play a hockey game for the Defense Force, the police hockey team, you need the approval from the Minister of National Security. And so that approval would have been given. The point that you mentioned, let me finally add, of the concern of political interference, it is there, it is blatant, but we have a situation now where I would even send that report to this present commissioner and she would not lift a finger, and our media has indeed been intimidated. They will not ask Fitzgerald Hines, did you give permission to Suzette Martin and others to leave our territorial waters where it is they were involved in the abduction of a citizen? Because that could very well turn to Fitzgerald Hines now being questioned to ascertain if he was part and parcel of aiding and abetting to approve an unethical or illegal action to take place, which could be misbehavior in office. So we have commissioners that will not do what is required. We have the last 2 acting commissioners and commissioners. They put 70 police officers for the last 3 years to go on a fishing expedition on firearms. That is 500,000 police hours. And not one person has been arrested, charged, or questioned. But they will not put one police officer to look at the problem we have with illegal weapons that have contributed to 95% of murders by firearms. That is when it is that the politicians start to manipulate and control our law enforcement, it is time for us to be concerned.
Well, I'd just like to point out also, one of the things that I noticed with the current executive of the police, and maybe this is just a correlation, but major hauls of illegal firearms being confiscated don't seem to have as much of those as we did before, while they are focusing on legal firearms, which, again, this whole situation with Brent Thomas, there are a lot of questions there. But I do have to ask, just for a point of clarification, because you've been at both ends of that spectrum, Suzette Martin, who I believe may have been an ACP or a lower rank at the time, she would not have the authority to get a plane to carry out the exercise. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, 100%. It's to the point that any member of the Defense Force or Protective Services, if you need to go on vacation, you need approval from the higher authority. No ACP commissioner can leave our territorial waters to be involved in anything without the authorization of the Minister of National Security. I have stated this on several occasions. Not one person in the media has the strength of going to Fitzgerald Hines to ask him, did you give approval? Not one person in the media has asked Ulla Christopher or McDonald Jacob, did you give approval to Suzette Martin? They cannot say yes because the commissioner does not have that approval. Our approval as commissioner only resides within the territorial waters within Trinidad and Tobago. So anytime we have to take part in anyone going on a course, going on to play a hockey game, a football game for the Defense Force, to be involved in an investigation, you must get approval from the Minister of National Security. And everybody's afraid to ask Fitzgerald Hines. They're afraid to ask Ulla Christopher. And Ulla Christopher will not in any way She'll say a word because she doesn't want to have Fitzgerald Hines now being questioned for a matter like this. And that is where we have reached to in this country. So when we criticize Suzette Martin and others, they would not have been able to do this unless they had the authority. And don't get me started about the use of the CARICOM aircraft. A CARICOM aircraft cannot be provided if a commissioner of police makes the request. So this was done specifically with politicians getting involved in directing law enforcement in investigations. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. We can go back to politicians hiring 3 sets of auditors, or I should say members of the state, hiring 3 sets of auditors from the Barrington, and Hayden Prashad, then the Stanley John report, then the audit report, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, handpicking people, no tender process, turning them into investigators, letting them write reports, and then you want to go in Parliament to read it, which is the one place you can lie, similar to what you did with Emailgate, and not be sued. That is how this country has reached, where politicians are now hiring persons to turn them into investigators, to be involved in investigations, where the investigation has no witness, no complainant, no report, nothing, and it is all based on something called allegation. Allegation has proven to be the word used in this country to discredit persons. It started with the Scott Drug report. Randy Burroughs was discredited based on the Scott Drug report, and everything in that report, it was alleged, it is rumored, and we have been told. Not one person can be arrested from that Scott Drug report, and we have not learned from that Scott Drug report. Hiring civilians, and all they're doing is going and listening to a set of Lacqueray and Rumshop talk. You type it up to make it look nice and packaged to say, look what I have achieved. And nothing could come of it because it is based on just that. But that could be used to destroy people, as what was done with Randy Burroughs.
I mean, you make a good point there, because some people might want to hold on to that Scott report. But at the end of the day, they'll also be disgruntled about the current phenomenon of the police having the intelligence but somehow not having the evidence. Well, if you just don't have the evidence, this is the problem. And if you rely on a report that doesn't provide anything substantial to go off of, well, you set a bad precedent that we're going to, I guess, follow, all these many years later. Now, with that said, there recently was a press conference. I'm not necessarily going to ask you to comment in detail on the press conference, except this, because there were 2. One by the DCP, Benjamin, and then a follow-up the day after they had a National Security Council meeting. And I called it the obligatory crime exploded. We have an obligatory press conference to tell the people, don't be afraid, because we're going to redouble our efforts yet again. Basically, the same thing that we said before. Now, usually when this happens, there are questions about the lack of strategies, the lack of innovation, the ineffectiveness of the police service. And I do wonder, to what extent, do you think that, or would you agree with me if I were to say that if the political leadership is undermining the police executive, and you have, for all intents and purposes, potentially, yes people, as opposed to people who actually know this is when we could do it, this is when we're breaking the law, this is the proper advice to give to the politicians in order to get the effective results in crime fighting that they want, as just one example. They're being undermined potentially. They're not independent potentially. So we have politicians who may not actually know what they're doing. And I just say that for the sake of saying it. And this is the result. This is the result when you blur the lines and you try to micromanage people whose profession is different to your profession. They're the police. You are the politicians. That's not the same thing. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Just before that, going back to Keith Rowley, this is not in any way to question his intelligence, because when we speak about you can't discredit and attack and condemn or even fire people based on intelligence, that is what happened with myself. It was based on allegations and not one person. There's not been one report, so they're all lies. But in contrast, when a senior government minister had a special branch report with intelligence, with damn information about him, the same Keith Rowley said, you can't fire somebody based on intelligence. So it shows politicians and hypocrisy go hand in hand, because he didn't want to touch that individual because he said it was intelligence. But when you got rumor, rumshop talk, and lies without any data, any evidence, any witnesses, any complainant, any documentation, that was a major meaning of concern pertaining to the police service under my watch. So that is one thing. As it pertains to what you speak about, definitely, I mean, when you listen to that press conference, it is unfortunate that DCP Benjamin would have gone down that road. I know what he was trying to do. He was trying to give the assurance to the country. You cannot give assurance with lies. To say that we are in full control, we are not in full control. We have lost. We are losing badly. But he tries to give and sometimes with leadership, he was not trained in the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, so he doesn't have that type of leadership training to understand. One of the aspects with good leadership is being truthful. When it is you try to lie to show authority, people are going to more question your relevance and your competence. So you need to be honest. So as much as you will try to show that degree of we are in control, we are in command, you say that when it is everybody see Rome burning, they're going to laugh at you. Even with Fitzgerald Hines, he was very shrewd and very tactical. Not when the question was asked by a reporter,
yes.
Do you agree? What Fitzgerald Hines did, he moonwalked like Michael Jackson, rightly so. Had he stated, no, I do not agree with him, he would have thrown Benjamin under the bus and Benjamin would have looked like a fool. Had he stated, yes, I agree with him, then he should be fired as a Minister of National Security to say security is under control. So he babbled 20 big words for about 12 seconds without answering the question on 2 occasions because he couldn't answer because Benjamin put them in that situation. And there again lies the problem where politicians have become so influential. It happened with myself and the director of the SSA, a very senior government official. I wouldn't call Fitzgerald Hines' name, but when it is that people are trying to influence senior persons as it pertains to giving a junior constable access to equipment, as it pertains to wireless, to wiretapping, and the individual should not have that capability because of his rank and his lack of training. That is political influence. You cannot try to influence the Commissioner of Police and the Director of the SSA to give a certain individual such authority. That is not your place. And this is the problem we have I do not want our country to be banana republic oriented. That is what happens when senior persons stand, and when you stand up, you get fired. Roger Best was fired for it. I was fired for it. Roger Best was fired because the SSA was involved in very serious investigations aligning senior government officials with criminal elements involved in giving them contracts and so forth. When that happens and you fire the individual, that is the first sign of dictatorship, because the first sign of dictatorship is trying to take control of law enforcement. When that happens, we are in rough waters and everyone is staying silent. No one is saying anything. The business sector, they're not saying a word because they want to keep their state contracts. All of them who complain, they call me, every single head of the business chamber. Gary, we're so disappointed by the actions of the Prime Minister because we needed those firearms, but not one of them is willing to open their mouth and complain because they want to keep the state contracts. That is what happens.
And I just wanted to point out, when you say that Mr. Best was fired, when the others in the SSA see that, or let's just say, let's just speculate now. This happens, most likely the people that were working under him, the people that remain there, they're going to see that, they're going to see the lack of any consequence for that, and they're going to say, well, I need to fall in line. Is that
Correct.
reasonable to say? That's the that's the risk in a security system when it's treated in that manner, would you say?
100%. So this is not to knock Christopher and McDonald Jacob. They saw that I stood firm to defend the police service when we were being wrongfully, politicians were trying to get us to invade people's private homes to have them arrested, in contrast to the ignorant comments made by Rowley, Kamala, and Philip Alexander, because they are civilians totally ignorant of understanding the law. And I stood firm because I knew the law. We did not have authority. Had we done this, it would have been a repeat of 2011 when politicians influenced Stephen Williams to do the wrong thing. And we are still paying the price. That is leadership. Leadership is to stand firm against wrongdoing. When I stood firm against my own government with live sport, people say, oh, Gary Griffith, you can't be trusted. Of course you cannot trust me. Because if I see wrongdoing, I am going to expose it. So I cannot be trusted to allow wrongdoing to take place. I cannot be trusted if it is that there's a matter between a government official and, say, the director of the PCA, and people are trying to tell me to get amnesia. No, I cannot be trusted. I will stand firm and say I will speak the truth. I am not, if it is that I see a senior person who was very strongly aligned to the PNM pre-2010 and then give a big state contract to a gang leader to build a police station. No, I cannot be trusted because I will stand firm and say this is total nonsense, because that extra 20 million profit he's getting, he's now going to be used to use him to build, to get more firearms, hire more gang members, put hits on other gangs to get their contracts, and use the profit to hire rogue police officers to protect them. That's the type of leadership our country needs. Well, and when Earl Christopher and McDonald Jacob seeing what happened to myself and Roger Best, they are going to get in line, because to some of them, that is their life. And anytime it is you're a politician and you see that all I wanted to do is to be a member of parliament. So if I see this political leader, whether the prime minister or opposition leader, doing the wrong thing, I'm going to shut up and be a yes man or woman, because I never thought I could get this post. Same thing with Earl and McDonald. They never thought they will reach there. I don't need a post. What I need is to serve my country and remember to be vigilant, to do what is required based on my God, my country, my people. That is the type of leadership our country wants, but those are the people that would be crucified. And others will turn a blind eye 3 times before the cock crow. They will say nothing because they want to keep their walk.
Well, that's one of the things I want to get to, because, like I said, I think the tenor of the messaging and the feeling around how the police is conducting themselves shifted. You made a great deal about customer service and integrity of officers, and I don't necessarily think that McDonald Jacob did not try to continue, but he had that most famous incident where one PC Giltz was shot, and it was proven that he was shot from behind, the implication being by his colleagues and not by the suspect in front of him. And now we've reached the point where the media ambassadors of the TTPS, it's almost like if they're having to fight an uphill battle with some of their colleagues when it comes to how to treat with the public, how do you interact with the public professionally. And this is an extension of what you just spoke about. When the service now sees the leadership being ineffectual, and dare I say, I would say, I'm not going to say anybody else said this, that Earl Christopher, for the most part, is very weak in a position. There's very little metric that I could point to, whether from strategy, administration, field work, etc., to say she is good at whatever aspect of the job. From what I understand, she's from administration, and she has that whole corporal promotion situation because of an Excel spreadsheet error, right? I don't even understand how that was allowed to happen and how it got so far. But anyway, this trickles down to the members of the service. And now I feel as though whatever gains that might have been made with yourself and others in the service trying to promote, guys, we need to be more respectful, more professional, because the police is now running into the situation where the public is trusting them less and less. And they want the public to trust them in order to report crimes like home invasions and extortion in particular. And the thing about it is, and I've said this before, well, one of the reasons why major crimes might be down is because if the public doesn't want to report them to you, obviously your statistics are not going to reflect the crimes in existence. So, but I have seen too many anecdotal evidence of police on the ground doing the wrong thing. And I do wonder if it's in part because the leadership has trickled down.
Yeah, well, definitely it is leadership by example. I mean, even going back, and it starts again with the politicians. Remember, Earl Christopher got 30% less than myself. Earl got 52% by qualified international experts who have selected commissioners in 20 different countries in the world. When they interviewed her in 2018 in several different things, mock media conference, essays, operational plan, role fit, she got 52%. She didn't come in the top 15. I got 82%, she got 52%. So in contrast to the misleading report by Kamler, I got the highest points. And then you had a police service commissioner that was appointed by Kamler, and they said, look, we don't want Gary because maybe Kamler might want him, which is what happened when she abstained from me as commissioner. And I got 82%, and they still placed me fourth. And no one in the media could ask Martin George, Commodore Franklin, you were in the police service commission, how did Gary get 82%, top the merit list, and you still placed him fourth? And then Keith Rowley decided, well, let us bring Gary Griffith. Not because Gary Griffith got 82%, Gary probably wouldn't have liked the UNC, so he will go off. You can't operate like that as a politician. Let's bring in a commissioner who will look after our interests politically. And then even the same Kamler and the same police service commission, you get a new police service commission handpicked by a president who did not adhere to the law. In other countries, she could have probably been arrested. And then that person, you from getting 52% not coming in the top 15, you place her first. That is the ignorance of this present police service commission, and then renew her contract. That is what we have to go through, and it goes with leadership by example. At my position as commissioner of police, 97% of the things I did, the media never knows. I would have been out 2 o'clock in the morning in roadblocks with young officers, being on the ground, going to police station. I went to every police station in my first 3 months, and several of those stations, some of them said they were there for 30 years and they never saw a deputy commissioner of police go up. And we're talking about stations in Icacus and so forth. And that is what is required. Put systems to measure the officer's performance, whether it was online reporting, the police app, 482 Gary. It meant that every police officer knows that if I misbehave in a roadblock, if I do the wrong thing, I can be pulled up by the commissioner the very same day. They know they're not going to get out with Earl Christopher. So now we get back to the point where a police officer will literally want to arrest a lady because she has a camouflage rag, because we have an improper law. Those things would never have taken place under my watch. Why did kidnapping stop under my watch? Why was there no home invasion? Why was there no extortion? Because we had covert operators working to deal with extortion. We were able to use the technology provided to put an end to kidnapping, and for the first time ever, breaking into doors, kicking down doors, and arresting kidnappers whilst the victim was still there, rescuing victims. That never happened before or after. When you remove the technology, the units, the systems, the policies for 21st century policing, and you go back to the backward 1960s policing by putting a little box and tell people to give recommendations, you try to put police officers back in police stations, and instead of putting them out onto the streets. People go to New York, Miami, London. How often have you seen police stations? We've gone down to the backward policing. This is what Dwayne Gibbs was doing, and Kamil Prasad Visesa removed him and brought in Stephen Williams, who she claimed to be a failure under the PNM, but you brought him as your commissioner under the UNC government. So that is the problem we have with politics getting involved and infiltrating into law enforcement. And unfortunately, these are the same police officers, so let's not knock them. These were the same officers that there was a 59% public trust and confidence 3 years ago. It was the highest public trust and confidence in any arm of the public service. So a year later, it was 8%. It was the lowest. These are the same police officers. What is the difference? Leadership.
Well, and now there's another aspect of this, which I have lightly touched on over the years, including when you yourself also touched on this. I think I kind of, okay, it's out there in the public to some degree, we could talk about it. But I still have this concern, and as you're here, and I have a chance to speak with you directly about it, it's the escalating violence and how further it could go. Because when you were commissioner, one of the things that I found very interesting, I was grateful for, you were confiscating, or officers under your tenure were confiscating assault rifles, submachine guns. We're talking like about 5 or 6, 5.56 or some 6.2 rifles here, and a handful of 9mm submachine guns there at a time, right? And that I might be lowballing the estimates. Hundreds of rounds of ammunition and so on and so on. Multiple weapon caches like this were confiscated. At that time, we did not see what we then saw with the Pennywise robbery, which I guess we could point to that as that's when the first incident happened. We're going to spray down our targets with automatic fire, and they can't respond. And we just saw a daylight ambush, almost military style, right? Luckily, no one else was hurt, which is one of the concerns of weapons like these. And now we've reached the point where this is the weapon of choice. This is the strategy of choice. I have a target. Doesn't matter what's around the target. If I spray 40 bullets at him in about 10 seconds, he's going to die. Other people could die, but I'm a gangster. You know, the whole system is against me. The world is against me. I don't care about them. Now, the thing is, we already seen one gangster, luckily with a pistol, take pot shots at a deputy commissioner of prisons. And that same day was, I believe, the last time we had a major weapons haul, which included a 50 caliber rifle. I am concerned that the escalation could go further, that we could see worse attacks in this country, both in terms of the amount of civilians being hurt or killed, as well as the type of targets that the criminal element might eventually go after. And am I correct in that fear, in that concern? Because the way how things are going with law enforcement, I don't really see anything to stop that from happening.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. And it goes right back again with the policing being totally manipulated by the politicians. As I mentioned earlier, 70 police officers have been assigned for the last 3 years. See anything you all could find on legal firearms with corruption. 70 police officers, 24 hours a day for 3 years, being involved in investigations, raiding people's homes, flying up to Barbados, locking up people with no information, tapping persons' phones, get the FIU getting involved. And all of this, by the way, the state is then sued and hundreds of millions lost, and the taxpayers have to pay now. And when we did that, we're speaking about 500,000, as I mentioned, police hours used, and not one person arrested, not one name called, not one firearm seized, because they were all lies.
Well, hold on. One firearm was seized. The person had, I think, his license and ammunition on him on a plane. The gun was at home. Somehow, it was then justified to seize his firearm, which was not part of his mistake when he tried to fly with his FUL and some ammunition.
But I'm speaking about based on the 3 audits that were done.
Right, yeah, no, but I just want to point out, the one arrest that I know that they made, one could argue was in utter bad faith.
Yeah, exactly. You're correct. And that is what they've reached to now. Now, by the way, it has been brought to my attention, we have something called a firearm lodging police unit. They are at Piarco Airport, stopping you, asking you for your passport, getting your number, verifying if you have a firearm, and then running back to have a unit to go back to see if the person actually lodges firearm so they could arrest the person when he returns. That is how petty we have reached. Finding anything possible to go after law-abiding citizens who have a legal firearm. And not one police officer was assigned to deal with the problem that has contributed to over 97 or 98% of murders by firearms, which are illegal firearms. I drafted the Border Protection Unit for the Prime Minister. He ignored it. I then, as a political leader and now being a politician, I understood the concern that we have now. And I stated that the biggest problem that is now taking place is these criminal elements have automatic weapons. We have even a deputy commissioner of police. He said what it was, an assault, an AR. Somebody had an AR, and an AR means an assault rifle. An AR is not an assault rifle. He didn't even know what an assault rifle is, an automatic weapon. It is not, but that is the problem we have now. So we have the criminal elements, most of them with automatic weapons. These individuals can kill 35 persons in less than 3 seconds. And this is not to put fear into the country, but for us to face reality. So somebody could be by a nightclub, by a bar on the avenue, and you want to target that one person, and you spray that automatic weapon, and 35 rounds will fly out in less than 3 seconds and they drive off. You can kill 35 people because you wanted to kill that one person. That is the danger of an assault rifle. Anywhere in a non-banana republic, you will see that as being a terrorist, because it means that this person now has the capability to have some degree. So you don't need to have a hand grenade or an explosive device, an IED, improvised explosive device. An automatic weapon can cause you to do the same damage that a hand grenade could do. And when I mention a recommendation, which is what I intend, I would like to do if and when I get into government, is anybody with an illegal assault weapon that can kill 35 persons in 3 seconds should be deemed a terrorist. By doing that, it will take away the possibility of them having bail, take away the possibility of them getting out, capital punishment, and anybody involved in aiding and abetting, providing the protection, the security, the financing, the importation, they also are deemed terrorists. You know what Keith Rowley says? Gary Griffith plan is to say that every criminal is a terrorist. He rubbished it because it gives the impression that the government is sympathetic to the criminal elements. That is the best way to deal with it because again, just under my watch and before, the police would have been seizing probably 800 to 1,000 illegal firearms annually. I think now it's just a couple hundred. So it is either they cannot find these firearms, and if so, it means that the criminal elements are securing it in a proper manner, or the police are spending more time dealing with legal firearms than putting focus on trying to extract illegal firearms. And if it is we don't change the law, what happens is when these individuals are held with this automatic weapon, one was held with 10 automatic weapons. It was dismantled. And the court said, well, it was dismantled, so it wasn't seen as a weapon in her case. And the man was given $50,000 bail and went back out onto the streets. He's going to put a hit on somebody to pay back the bail and get back more illegal firearms. So I throw the avenue for it to be done. Keep throwing rubbish it. And it gives the impression that the scales of justice must continue to be tilted towards the criminals rather than to favor the law-abiding citizens.
Well, my last question before we take a break, because you've touched on it there. I said, I believe months ago, I came to the conclusion that we could complain about the police, and yes, of course, there are things that are not done that we should be concerned about. But ultimately speaking, we don't make the guns here. We don't make the drugs here. Right? We don't bring the transnational criminal organizations to then influence the level of violence, right? It's brought into here through our borders. And ironically, I don't buy the Minister of Finances. I believe he was the one that offered this defense. Well, most of it doesn't come through illegal borders, it comes through legal borders. That's not a defense to me. You're just admitting, we're dropping the ball badly on one area. But I would say, well, no, the illegal borders, we saw during COVID, that was one of the main failures. That's why we had new infections and new strains coming into the country, because we had our own citizens locked out, but we didn't stop illegal immigrants coming in. The border security failure, to me, is the biggest single failure of national security. And we are suffering the dividends, the consequences of that action. And of course, in the press conference, the chief of the defense force basically said, well, supply chain management problems and the boat's not working, despite the fact that the last thing I remember any government official talking about the Coast Guard boats were Yeah, well, we have 8 or 12 of them. You know, the Coast Guard is working, and everybody I knew who had an opinion on the subject was basically saying, really? Where are they? I do not see them. And you and I, of course, could comment on the results. You've been basically commenting on the results. Look at the number of guns and the level of violence. Would you agree with me that the border security situation, or the lack thereof, that is essentially the gateway, the biggest failure that led us to this?
Of course, you hit the nail on the head. I can't recall what Minister Imbert said, but liaising with our international allies, they explained to me that 95% of the illegal weapons that enter Trinidad and Tobago come through the legitimate ports of entry.
I mean, that's crazy.
And that is from ports that come from North America. A lot of the weapons that we get from the mainland will really be old muskets, Pirates of the Caribbean type firearms. The type of sophisticated weapons you see now that comes from North America. And it is not an excuse, but it is exactly why, because I am there trying to fight crime, reduce crime. I got it down to 340 murders in my last full year, and it kept going down. But I explained to the Prime Minister, if you really want me to crack this for us to get back to less than 200 murders, I need to plug the illegal weapons entering through the ports. I provided that border protection unit, I drafted it, I showed him what to be done. He ignored it, totally ignored it. That was going to be a critical tool, and this is something I intend to establish in government, that border protection unit, to make sure we can plug those loopholes. I acquired mobile scanners. The mobile scanners will make sure that you can have that vehicle parked, and every vehicle that passes, it can see through that vehicle with all the doors and everything to see if there's a weapon inside that vehicle. They shut it down. They've never used those mobile scanners after I left. That is the type of ignorance that we have to deal with. It is rather unfortunate. It is not going to change. It seems that there's no degree of wanting to fix this. I then drafted, as the National Security Advisor, and Kamala Prasad continues to boast about it, but I drafted, and she doesn't know what to say after. I spoke about splitting the Ministry of National Security into a Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Home Affairs. She can't elaborate on it because she doesn't know much more about it. I will explain because I will be the one who knows to implement it. That would play a big part in securing our borders, having a ministry specifically of defense to deal with aspects of the defense force. And then when you look at the Coast Guard, I acquired 12 diamond vessels at $1.2 billion less than the 3 OPVs that would have done the same thing with hundreds of millions less in maintenance annually. And those vessels remain untouched for 9 years because of petty politics. And then they imported 2 other vessels, hostile, to add to the diamond vessels that were not being used. And by the way, with hostile, anyone who decides to ever go down the islands pass by Hartscott, the same hostile that the PNM government acquired, they acquired 6 vessels, hundreds of millions of dollars. When I went to hostile in Perth, I said, why did you give us those vessels? Those vessels are for lakes. They said, sir, your government at the time said they like it and they want it. So we signed a check and give it to them. Those vessels lasted, they took about 2 months before they were all damaged because they couldn't handle the waters and bouncing into the jetties. You could go by Hartscott, you would see them all there. They're there as a collector's item. That is the type of ignorance we have in national security.
Well, we could probably go on further, but we should save some for another outing. But I know that with this topic, it's a strange one because people's frustrations are demotivating. I know one caller said yesterday he's losing motivation to engage in conversations, but we do have our first caller, Mr. Digger Martin. Good morning, caller, you're on air.
Good morning, and I'm apologizing if the phone cuts off. It's not my problem, it's CSSC. Good morning to the former Commissioner of Police, Mr. Gigi. I hope I'm not offensive by calling you Gigi. And morning to you.
Call me Gary.
Okay, call him Gary, okay. Well, I have a short ball to bowl at him, but I don't want to go there yet. I come into the construction in the Martin, all right, in River Estate. I want to know why we are building a swimming pool, which is in walking distance to the Diamond Vale swimming pool. Are we facilitating squatters? Because that is a squatting area, and people have to know the history of River Estate. River Estate was purchased from a fella by the name of Brunton. And you know what Brunton was allegedly convicted for? Murdering a priest. But Eric William bought that piece of land because of the aquifer to provide water for the whole of Trinidad. Seeing we have a problem of water in Trinidad, I think they should revisit that decision made by the then Prime Minister to see if we could facilitate using the water in that aquifer to basically, because we have a problem in water in Trinidad, 16%. The other question is, it has some bantering between the current Prime Minister, a company with the name, the director is the name of a flower plant, Rose, and MP Muninal. And one of the things that the directors, the one smelling like a rose, said, Muninal has put him in a position where, because he gave all the value of money, that he could possibly be extorted. And I find this passing strange. He didn't add to his post. He is in this predicament because Fitzy and them sleeping on the job. If you don't have facilitated people to extort businessmen, then you won't have that issue. Then you go fight up with Muninal in the court for slandering your name. So they do post and they hide the throat. What is the core problem? The core problem is the sleeping on the job. And the other issue, and this is to you, as saying former commissioner of police, are going back into history. The two Komoto children who were using high-power rifles in Komoto, did they have a permission? Did they have an FUL? Did they have a permit? I hope you all enjoy this conversation. Bye and have a nice morning.
Thank you. Mr. Griffith, he means the children of former Attorney General. Okay, right. Yeah, just make, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so just let me quickly what you're speaking about is sporting facilities. You mentioned with me at certain hats. One of the hats as well as that I've been manager of national hockey teams, men and women for 10 years. I was on the technical staff of the West Indies T20 World Cup team in London in the World Cup. I've been on the technical staff with the national football team. I was the highest goal scorer in Trinidad and Tobago in hockey for several years. So hockey is sport is something that is very dear to me, and it has a part to play with national security. It is known as secondary crime prevention, using sport to turn young people away from a life of crime. And that is why when I formed that Commissioner's Cup, we started having gang members turn up to watch young people play. And the gang members started looking at other gang members and say, yeah, we're going to take our battle out on the sporting field instead, and trying to calm the situation down. That is what sport can do. When it is I built that AstroTurf in St. James Barracks, it was to get persons in the community.
We have another caller. Sorry, caller, good morning.
Sorry.
Caller, are you there?
Yes.
Morning, caller, go ahead, you're on the air.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, I should like to ask Gary. Good morning, Gary. Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
I should like to ask Gary his opinion, his personal opinion on the situation regarding the recommendations for the national inquiry into the 1990 attempted coup d'etat. Have any of those recommendations been implemented?
Sure. Okay, so let me just finish off on the last one. So I understand the importance of sport. It has not been done. It has not been developed. That's why national teams wait until the day before whether they are traveling. There's been no input or support for our national football team. And then when the teams suffer, we cry and criticize. When they succeed, you want to cut a check for them after the fact. That is not how you deal with sport. As it pertains to your comment, there was a recommendation for there was a commission of inquiry. I was the only Minister of National Security in about 6 after me that ever lifted it or opened that document. And I was able to implement 11 out of the 33 within the last few months. I was Minister of National Security. The formation of a National Operations Center, linking all the different units to work together, the formation of an elite unit, which is where I formed the Special Operation Response Team and the National Security Special Operation Group, making sure we have the proper technology, making sure we have the type of command center for an immediate response to link intelligence with different arms of the protective services. So at least 1/3 of the recommendations of that attempted coup commission of inquiry I implemented. Every single one was shut down after I left office.
Now, with regards, I want to go back because this is a point that I understand people are concerned about it. I'm not that concerned, but maybe I'm wrong with regards to Minister Alwari's children allegedly with the rifles. Exactly what, if any, rules were broken there? Because I myself, to me, it doesn't seem that important. I have bigger fish to fry, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am overlooking something that's very important.
Yeah, so let me clarify again. to start with, we have to use the word alleged, because up to now, we can't have anybody confirm that in the children. It was as ridiculous as that. So we can't even start about the children of the then Attorney General. But there's had it been any other children doing it, this would not have been a problem. And I'll tell you why. We have hundreds and hundreds of photos of this being done for decades in the defense force known as a caravan, where if you take out the firing pin, you take out the magazine, children are given the opportunity to hold the firearms. That has been done for decades. It has never been an issue because it is not possession of a firearm. Possession means that you have full control and authorization to use the firearm. Even if it is under the supervision of a law enforcement authorized person, and he's giving it to you under familiarization purposes, it is not a crime. It became a concern because of the, we catch him, we could go after him. But so now, if the individuals had fired the weapon, if it is that they had full control of the weapon and the weapon had all the mechanisms on it, that becomes an issue. If they had full use of the weapon without the authorization and the approval from the law enforcement heads, that becomes an issue. So it is as ridiculous as stating if I have a firearm and my son is 12 years old or 13 years old, and I say, son, this is my firearm. If anything happens to me, this is what you need to use if I am shot. And you give the person it to hold while you're watching them. That I'm sure it's done all over because you never know what is going to happen. You have not committed a crime. It is under familiarization. It is not possession. If it is that you turn your back, your son picks up the firearm and walks out with it, then he has committed a crime because now it's possession. So that is just to clarify. Everybody who's against the PNM would not accept that. But trust me, I have a little more knowledge in law enforcement and understanding law than some of you all who will just be bitter. But there is nothing that was done in an illegal manner.
And it cannot be said that you are, Rowley's right-hand man. All things you will defend PNM. I just want to say, you won't have a bias for the PNM. And I think that's an important distinction to make. Did they fire the gun? Did they go through all of those processes? And there's also an interesting concept of familiarity, I think, that we underestimate with regards to children and firearms. But before we get that, we have Digger Martin back on the line. I think he wants to have a follow-up to that Camp Kumuto question. Digger Martin, welcome back.
Okay. Good morning again, Commissioner of Police. I'm listening to what you're saying. Was the incident investigated? Is the crux of the question. Was it investigated? If it was investigated, I could understand what you are saying there. But as police commissioner, there was see something, wanted to them when you see something. I want to know if an investigation took place for we to clear those two individuals who, as you say, is still an allegation. For it to be an allegation and non-allegation, it must be investigated. Common sense, plain talk, bad manners are gone.
Right, and I'm actually trying to remember, getting old. If that was after, even if it was under my watch as Commissioner of Police, I think it may have been before I was Commissioner of Police.
Yes, it might have been because that happened, I believe, fairly early in the administration, after the first election, so 2016 maybe.
Yeah, so I wasn't Commissioner of Police, so I honestly do not know. What I did, however, is anytime it is that there's something that goes about in the media, it is my responsibility to do some degree of research. And then when I did the research, it was there and it was obvious that the person that there were special forces persons, there were persons from the police service there on the range at the time. I got the information that there was no firing pin, there was no magazine connected, there was no, the individuals were being familiarized. It was then brought to my attention. I would have seen hundreds of different photographs of young boys and girls getting the same thing done under something known as the Defense Force Caravan, which would have been done even when then Minister of National Security, Eddie Dillon, was minister when this thing came about. When he was Chief of Defense Staff, that was also allowed. So when I looked at it, I realized there was no crime that I could say that, look, let us go and target individuals to show that a criminal offense took place. There was no such thing. There was never any official report submitted.
Clarification, I think the magazines were in the rifles, but that doesn't mean that they had ammunition in the magazines. Or sorry, I might actually be mixing up the specific terminology of magazine. But we have a call on the line. We have Move on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, good morning to the panel. Good morning to Gary Griffith.
Morning.
I want to thank Gary Griffith for the Commissioner's Cup. That was an excellent initiative, and I found that this present administration could have carried it on. I can remember when I was in Move and the Commissioner's Cup was going on. People from Coconut Drive, from Never Dirty, from Chinopu coming and enjoying it. People who never come in the area come in. you had about looking at 200 vehicles parked up and things. It was like an excitement. And when after it finished, children walking and talking about football and the attitude and everything changed. That was a major success. And I think this government has failed in that in respect of not carrying on that Commissioner's Cup. I want to congratulate you, Mr. Griffith, for that initiative. And God's blessings and success with your endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. I mean, on talking point, I think I spoke with Andre Batiste recently, among others, about it happens in other jurisdictions. They keep the basketball courts open up till 11, 12 o'clock. The police, they stay there because they know, well, the young people are here. Let's protect the initiative. So it makes sense for the police service locally here in TNT to be involved in sports. And at the end of the day, you might not like Mr. Griffith, but it's not as though what he's saying has not been proven to be true elsewhere as well. And here we have a caller confirming some of the benefits of that initiative. And I think it's a shame. We have another calling line before I get back. I still want to get back to you on the familiarization of firearms for children and how important that could be. But we do have another caller on the line. Good morning, caller. You on the air?
Yeah.
Morning, caller. You on the air? Go ahead.
Yeah, morning, Sean. Morning, Mr. Griffith.
Morning.
Good morning.
This scandal of this Coast Guard vessel being down really has upset me. And I'm just referring to the Guardian of Saturday, the 7th of September. Coast Guard to get new assets as repair continues. So you have smaller vessels down and they need parts. But what is upsetting to me, Mr. Griffith, is this one. The larger vessels, about 8, this might be operational according to the Air Vice Marshal Darren Daniel in 18 months. I mean, how can you be doing contracts or renegotiating contracts when contracts are probably yearly or at least, and another 18 months these larger vessels are going to be down? This is like a man walking into the wicket with a 20-inch bat in width and still get bowled down. This is just scandalous, Mr. Griffith. Why are these contracts not being negotiated properly? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, well, again, I'll tell you why. It's because of sheer petty politics. It's the same thing like back to sport. That astroturf we have in St. James Barracks, anyone could drive past there. You will see it never be in use, hardly ever be in use. And that is supposed to be given to the community. They have refused to use it because Gary Griffith built it. Going back to the damaged vessels, Gary Griffith acquired it. We're not going to use it. And then because they started getting pressure, now they're trying to fight up. These vessels were virtually brand new. When you speak about a vessel just 9 years old untouched, these are virtually new vessels. So it's no major requirement that is needed. But again, even if they repair these vessels, let me clarify something. It is still not going to be operational. I'll tell you why. Because you must equate manpower strength with naval asset acquisition. When they tried to acquire the 3 OPVs, each OPV required 80 persons to be fully trained to be able to use an OPV. They only sent 80, which meant that if you use 80 and they have rotation, you must have 80 plus 80. And then you need a third 80 in case of retirement, resettlement, resignation, death, injury, or whatever. So you need 240 fully trained persons to man 1 OPV. So you need 720 to man 3. We had 80. So had we acquired those 3 OPVs, up to this day, we still don't have the manpower strength. So 15 years, those 3 OPVs would have done the same thing the damaged vessels would have been doing. So when they PNM till they die supporters, they shut down the OPV, they cancel the OPV. When you get these stupid comments, those OPVs would have been doing the exact thing that the damaged vessels have been doing right now. Which is why I acquired the Chinese vessel that's 100 meters long that would have taken 200 sailors to go out, spend 2 weeks to be trained as sailors. They don't even have that. So to train as a sailor, you have nothing to train you as a sailor. And let's go to the Air Guard. The Air Guard for 5 years, they don't even have a chicky chunk to fly, far less a plane or an aircraft. So we have an Air Guard with 500 people in PRCO that have just been sitting down twiddling their thumbs playing all fours because they have no aircraft. Same thing with the Coast Guard.
We have another caller, but I'll just say, Mr. Griffith's comments on how you crew a naval asset, that is generally correct. An aircraft carrier doesn't have 1 crew. A submarine doesn't have, in the U.S. Navy, doesn't have 1 crew. They rotate crews, right, to make use of the asset. You can't just have the same people go out there every day. They have to come back to shore at some point. We do have another caller on the line. Good morning, caller. Caller, good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead, you're on the air.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen. Sean, the
Yes.
first thing I have to tell you is, I always have to go back to the beginning. I always have to do that. This interference by politicians with the police service started since with Eric Williams and Burroughs. Remember that Eric Williams and $6 grand off Burroughs. And I'm saying that why the police service started since then, what this current PNM leadership is doing, this is kind of the same nonsense. The other thing one is, I'm watching you know, on this program I find you're dealing with a lot of things that other stations not dealing with. Careful, they will come at you. Be very careful. And then, in closing, I am hoping that you are part of the next government. It could be part, it could be Z. And I want to tell you something. When that time reaches, one of the things that I would hope you put as priority is dealing with noise pollution. And this has to do with people's rights. People are suffering, and everybody is ignoring it, including our intellectuals. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller. Yes, it's one of those things. The caller calls in quite frequently on that point, and I can't blame him because we've just accepted it. We've accepted it, and when we accept things that should not be correct, it's easier than to accept bigger breaches of the law, I would argue. But, okay, first, we have San Fernando on the line, so I'll have to hit a pause. San Fernando, good morning, you're on here. Morning, caller.
Yeah, morning, Captain, morning, Stone. Today, I tell you that I feel so happy to have a big brother like Gary Griffith. Now, the course of history was changed drastically because of that guy. And now we have him on a kind of limbo. And only because the people who are supposed to look after being in charge, they are very petty. In fact, they have their own agenda. Me and worry about that. I'm not going there. But Mr. Gary, you had an opportunity once. I recall you said, when I was down Mark, he going to, what in his pants. Up to now, I haven't heard anything about it, and I wonder why you didn't really do that at that time and change the course of history. Now, forget the DPP, because the DPP, according to the law, he's the man to say yea or nay. But you the Commissioner of Police, and I remember the Commissioner of Police, the police stopping opposition minister on the highway and charge him. So don't come and tell me, or you can't go and charge a man with the 2.5 million, or AV, sorry, not AV, the oil, the 100 million oil. You understand? So now these petty small boys, and then when they see that happen, what are they going to do? But they could do too. All right? So answer that for me, please. Thank you.
Sure. And let me just say that as quickly as I could. This is not a PNM bashing. This has happened with all governments in the last 15, 20 years. After Patrick Manning had a lot of vision. Maybe it is that he went to an extreme without understanding the type of technology we had. So when he had the Goodyear blimp, it was a blimp. We shut it down and they put it with nothing. As the minister and then commissioner, I did the proposal with the budget to get drones. Welcome to the 21st century. But you remove the blimp, and we have never replaced it with anything. Mm-hmm. As soon as the government changed, you shut down the blimp, and it took me 3 years when I became minister to show the importance of us getting the drones. I got the approval, I got the budget allocation, you never used it. You then removed the OPP, you never replaced it with anything. As soon as I became minister, I understood what he was getting at with the OPPs, and I was able to get the same vessels for 1.2 billion less. You shut down the Special Anti-Crime Unit for no reason at all. I saw the value of SWORD, which is why I formed the Special Operation Response Team. So yes, so the PNM people, yes, I cheated because I saw the value of what the PNM did. And then the PNM did the same thing when the People's Partnership left. I formed the National Operations Center, which is what the Commission of Inquiry wanted. You removed it. I formed the National Security Special Operation Group. You shut it down. I formed the Community Policing. You removed it. I formed the Training Academy. You shut it down. Every single thing I did. Then as Commissioner of Police, I put the body cameras, the pepper spray, the tasers, the dashboard cameras, the Special Operation Response Team, the Gender-Based Violence Unit, the Commissioner's Command Center, the Operational Command Center. Everything you shut down. Politicians, they get involved with their miserable self, shut down and dismantle out of bad mind, and the country suffers. And it should not happen. When it is I spoke as a commissioner, you can't do a civil matter, say that matter is closed, and expect me as a commissioner to say, well, because you close your civil matter, dealing with an investigation with oil, I will automatically close mine. And I said, no, that I think was the last nail in the coffin for me. How dare I, if it is that the politicians had a civil matter and they ended it, my police matter was still being investigated, I must shut it down as well. And so that's pertaining to that matter with the oil. And that's unfortunately what happens with politicians. They get involved and now they control our law enforcement.
There actually was a precedent recently where the Privy Council, in a different situation, basically said, hey, civil court cannot come and trump criminal court.
Exactly. Yeah, correct.
Now, do we still have another caller on the line? We have St. James on the line. Last caller. Sorry, Mr. Griffith. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
I don't know if Gigi could explain this. You know, very often he mentioned that they don't have equipment to sort of survey the borders and so. I'm talking about specifically about the air wing equipment. They have no equipment, but yet still on Independence Day, every Independence Day, I don't know where they find these equipment to fly. For a thing, and then go to Tobago and so on. So I don't know where they get equipment from. I don't know if you could probably throw some light on that. Bye.
Yeah, sure. So what happened again with Patrick Manning? Yet again, the man was brilliant. He had Augusta helicopters, but again, when I did the research, we paid $2.4 billion, $2.4 billion for 4 Augusta helicopters, when really and truly the cost for it was 83 million TT per helicopter. They packaged it into some massive madness known as maintenance. We were spending more to maintain a helicopter than it was to maintain one of those massive luxury aircrafts that Emirates will have. So Keith Rowley then realized the cost-benefit analysis was ridiculous. So you remove that, but we never replaced it with anything. And with that now, we have absolutely no air surveillance from the Coast Guard, from the Air Guard, no helicopters, no drones, no aircraft. And what you will see is, I think that's Brico, one of those private commercial aircraft that can be used, by the way, but that is not under the control of the Trinidad and Tobago Air Guard. And therein lies the problem. So we have an Air Guard with no assets, we have a Coast Guard with no assets, we have an army that during the situation where 250 people were coming into Port of Spain to destroy the city, I had to utilize my strategic training and tactics to try to divert them from destroying Port of Spain, yet the police service never got a thank you from it. Instead, the government decided to give thanks to 4 persons in the Ministry of Health for what they said every week was to tell people, social distancing, wear a mask, get vaccinated. And you get a national award for that. That's the kind of nonsense we have to go through. And then the army all stayed in camp throughout the whole period of COVID on standby. So we have never utilized the defense force as we should. It is very embarrassing. We have never provided them with the training, the technology, the equipment. Even with the police service, they don't have armored vehicles. They go into volatile areas to be killed, but the politicians have armored vehicles and nobody really studies them. Those things have to change. That's the reason I got back into politics. I'm not here to be a politician. I'm here to be a patriot, and I intend to make Trinidad and Tobago safe again.
Well, with that said, we are out of time. Maybe we could hit the issues around public firearms usage in the country and the policies around that at a later date, Mr. Griffith, because again, I think what you said there, the different aspects of private gun ownership, one of them being to familiarize your family with it so that then the kids don't, have accidents. That's just one thing that I would hope we could go over in the future, but we're out of time. So thank you to all of the callers. Thank you, Mr. Griffith, for joining me this morning to have this conversation, folks. I called him yesterday and he agreed to come today. That's not now for now situation. And for anyone who thinks, well, he is on this show, why not Dr. Keith Rowley or Kamala Pasabi-Sessa? They're welcome to face the public alongside, just like Mr. Griffith alongside me. Somehow I suspect they might not necessarily be as willing as Mr. Griffith. I'll just put that out there. Mr. Griffith, thank you. I don't know if you have any last words.
No, it is about accessibility. It's not that everything. I am asked 3 or 4 times a day by the media. And you want to be a prime minister, you want to be a political leader, but when you get the post, you're ducking the media. You're afraid. It's the same thing as me as Commissioner of Police. Yes. I did everything. Every single Wednesday, I will have a media conference to face the public. Ula Christopher, she has not held one media conference, I think, in a year. And now she comes with a laptop with a prepared statement. And again, all that goes to the percentage she got in the mock media conference and the role fit. So it is, if you can't play mass and afraid public, if you want to be in public life, you have to be prepared to face the scrutiny of the media and the public. and boy, do I get scrutinized. But you have to do it. You have to make yourself accessible. I think it is very unfortunate that politicians, they refuse to do so. But you want people votes, you want people support, you want to get in government, but you're afraid to be accessible to the public.